Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Secret Origins of Mint Condition. I am your host, James, and joining me is Joe.
Hey, folks, how you doing?
Special guest host Keith Tarnowski is with us.
Hello there, everyone.
And joining us is a very special guest who needs no introduction if you've listened to this podcast or in the comic world, but I'm going to give him an introduction anyway because he deserves it. He is the writer of many things, including Batman Soul of the Dragon, JSA World War II, Batman Superman Battle of the Super Sons. He is currently wrapping up his amazing fan-loved run on The Flash, and he just his issue of Green Lantern #1 just got released, so we're very happy, humbled, and excited and honored to have Mr. Jeremy Adams with us today.
Oh, I'm a mister. Wow. I don't know how
You could be-
about that.
you could be a sir also. We could have Sir Jeremy
Sir
Adams.
Jeremy Adams,
You know,
yes.
the thing I've fantasized about, how can I save the king in order to get, I was going to say queen, but she, I was like, how can I get one of those monikers, like.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And there were lots of things we want to talk to you about and we'll talk to you about. And there was a few ways I thought about starting this podcast, but I'm not going to bury the lead for the audience. We're talking to you the day after Green Lantern #1 came out. So
Yes.
how the fans have been very excited. I saw on your Instagram, you posted it was like one of the number one pre-selling books out from DC. So how do you feel about all that right now?
I mean, listen, I don't know how to describe this. It's weird because I'm such a kid that was a nerd loving this stuff when it was not cool. This is the stuff that got me beat up. And then suddenly I'm making a living at it. And, I obviously came to comic books about through the film and television world, which is not necessarily how you do it. And of course my family is like, this was inevitable, and when they, when they gave me Flash, it really seemed like, I don't know, they just, hey, you want the Flash? And I'm like, yeah, of course. What, are you kidding me? And I started writing it, and I don't know if it was just because Warner Brothers is a topsy-turvy company. No one got rid of me after a while, and fans were very complimentary. So it was great because suddenly I'm doing this Flash, and it's awesome. So then it's like, okay, we're taking off the Flash, tears, mourning. And then they say, we want you to do Green Lantern. And, I felt like a lot of pressure and I still feel like a lot of pressure. I mean, Jeff Johns was really cheerleading. He was like, yes, this is going to be awesome. You're going to crush it. I'm like, I am, like that. And it's hard because you're taking over a big title. There's a lot of expectation. There's so much more mythology with Green Lantern. And I needed to, for my own well-being, do this kind of stripped down version where I could get a handle on it. And then hopefully as we go along, we'll get bigger and bigger and we'll start exploring some of the bigger aspects of Green Lantern. But, how do I feel about it? I don't know, man. I'm still reeling. People have been very generous with their compliments. And, as I've always been, I just want to do right by the character. I want to do right by the fans. And I just love this, so I don't want it to stop.
Well, the issue is amazing. I got a digital copy. I didn't want to wait and get to the comic book store, so I got a digital copy and peeled through it right away yesterday.
Thank you.
I really thought it was I've always been a big Hal Jordan fan, even for the times when Hal Jordan was in his dark place. I still love the character.
Yes.
I even championed the time when he was Spectre. I thought it was an amazing time for him as well.
Listen, my feeling is one of my goals is to make everybody like Hal Jordan because there's not a lot of people that like Hal Jordan.
He kind of got, for good or for ill. I mean, the time when he was out of it, I guess, is when Jon Stewart got to rise to fame and be the Justice League Green Lantern. But I really loved your return to Hal Jordan. It's how I thought the character could be. It should be. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. I have to ask you, and maybe you can't say anything, or maybe it was just coincidence. Yeah. I'm assuming you pitched the idea of him being on Earth and Sector 2814 being quarantined. Is that correct?
The sector being quarantined definitely was something I pitched. Weirdly, this is how strange it is. A couple of years ago, when I was doing the Flash, and my previous editor said, "Hey, would you ever want to do Green Lantern?" I was like, "Sure. This is what I want to do." And it was very similar to what I wanted to do. And then that editor left, and so Paul Kaminsky, when he asked me to take over, he said, we really want to do kind of an Earth-centric Hal Jordan. And I'm thinking in my head, great, because I already have a pitch for that, you know? So it was kind of a combination of what editorial wanted Hal Jordan on Earth having adventures, and a pitch that I had in terms of the quarantining of Sector 2814 and why that could be. And then just finishing up, Jeff Thorne's run and reading it and seeing all the threads that were left over was very exciting for me as a writer, because I felt like there was a lot of ways I could go, and a lot of mystery to be had, because there was a lot, some very big changes at the end of that particular run that I think will give rise to some really cool stories.
No, yeah, absolutely. I look forward to seeing where your run goes. I'm curious if you. I guess this probably just happened by coincidence or parallel. Did it surprise you that when James Gunn talked about the Green Lantern series being more Earth based, was kind of similar to thoughts you had about taking
I
the
mean,
Green
we
Lantern?
were already down. Yeah, we were already down the road. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, because it's that Green Lantern. Well, there was that Green Lantern series that was going on for quite a while, that they were trying to make, and I knew some people that were writing on it and had gone through different iterations. And then, of course, James Gunn took over, and he said something like it was going to be more akin to True Detective. Um, I don't know what that means, So, gosh, I've never met James Gunn. I would love to, but maybe it is a happy coincidence, or maybe he said that to someone at DC, and that came down to, hey, we need to have a Hal Earthbound eccentric, centered thing. I don't know. I don't really know.
No, I was just curious because well, I mean, I'm just curious. Well, it'll be great whatever that is versus whatever your storyline
Right,
goes to. I'm
right.
sure it'll be great, and they'll feed off of each other.
So,
But we have like Joe and Keith are really big fans and huge fans of you too. So Keith, I'm going to throw it to you. Where would you like to follow up with Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get to more to Flash later, but right now I'd love just to kind of talk about his first issue of Green Lantern. I like Hal Jordan, but I've never been a huge fan. I'm more of a Kyle fan.
sure. And
But
you and everybody.
but I love Jeff Johns' run. It was
Yeah.
epic. It was amazing. And I gotta say, the first issue of your run, I was even talking to Joe about it before. My first thoughts when I put it down was, that's the best first issue I've read, like,
Wow.
for as long as I can remember. And you made Hal so so likable, but also so competent at the same time, with still his little
Right.
quirks, his little, his
Yeah.
Hal, kind of being let down to his last $50 and, being who he is.
Yeah.
I got like a spark while reading it. I'm like, I feel silly saying it after one issue, but I really like this version of Hal Jordan. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised, because I love your Flash run, but you really captured something there that I feel like is going to be, I don't know, I just feel like it's going to be something special. And I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying to look at Hal Jordan holistically in terms of everything he's gone through and what that might do to a person. And he's not so much I mean, he's cocky, but he's not so much the jerk. Maybe he was in different iterations. And I think my approach is that he's done some growing up, and there's a lot of like decisions he's made, and he's starting to realize how important. I don't know. There's something about the DC universe in general, and I did this with Wally a little bit. Was when I was writing Wally, it just became apparent to me as I moved forward that he might be one of the most well-adjusted characters in DC Comics. Even though he's gone through all this trauma, he's kind of grown from it, and he has a family, and he's growing. And like most characters don't, most superheroes don't grow like that. And so, as Dark Crisis was like examining the aspect of legacy, the thought for me about Hal was like, when you examine the idea of legacy, and we're talking about all these legacy characters, whether it's Nightwing or Wally or whoever, or Roy, it's like, but what about the guys that are passing the torch? What does that look like? What does it look like when that guy that is seeing these kids rise up and seeing these kids become heroes? What's his life like? And I did that with Barry a little bit. It's like, your protege has 3 kids and you're not even married to Iris, And
Right.
I think with Hal, there's an aspect of that. And one of the first thoughts was like, I wonder how much money he has in his bank account, And, and then you're up there in space and all this, the grandeur of it. You're leading the Green Lantern Corps in so many ways, and yet whatever happened up there made you kind of reevaluate what you were doing and what's more important. And so there's a real maturity there. I hope that, I mean, he's not going to be perfect like all of us, but it's also tonally, I'm trying to do something obviously I can't help but put a little silliness in different things like goats flying off of rocks or whatever. But I do want to make this tonally different than what I was doing with the Flash, just in terms of, as a writer, I want to try something a little different. And this has a little more soap opera and a little more romance, and a bigger mystery that's set up. And hopefully I've learned some stuff. So I'm just excited. I'm excited because I think the Green Lantern universe is vast and huge, but I want to start small. I want everybody to care about Hal in a way, so when we get to bigger things, it matters, and having Hal on Earth is like, weirdly, I don't know the last time he was on Earth and interacted with other superheroes and dealt with being, dealing at Coast City and a girl that he likes that's moving on, and like, is it even okay for him to pursue her? Like, there's all these things that I just want to try to be logically consistent with, but I'm having a lot of fun kind of exploring that.
Well, I gotta say, the other thing I love about your Flash and Green Lantern so far is the little touches that you add to the characters that might not be as noticeable, but kind of sink in. Like, basically the music you chose for this issue that Hal was listening to is exactly what I would have never thought about, but what I would imagine Hal would listen to, like classic rock.
Yeah, totally. He's kind of anachronistic, right? Like, he's the bomber jacket. I mean, that's kind of the juxtaposition of that character now. It's like, I'm a hotshot pilot. Oh, wait, no one flies jets? It's like all the stuff that was like, I was cool in high school. And it's like, wait, not much anymore. Like, but he is cool. That's what I think is part of it, is just realizing, and what he realizes in the first issue is like, what am I without this ring? And by the end of it, it's like, I'm a hero no matter what. This is who I am. This is what's inside of me. And people run away, but I'll run toward it. And I love that aspect of Hal Jordan. And the thing I keep thinking about is Hal thinking, the ring chose me. Originally the ring chose me. It looked all over the world and it chose me, and that means something in a way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is the heart of the character. You've like keep saying, you've nailed him completely. And I guess a little spoilery, but not spoilery. There's someone else in that bar scene at the end too, who's on Earth, Earth too, which I'm really curious where that's going. That's, I guess, part of the mystery that we'll find out soon, right? Or eventually.
Yeah, eventually. It's interesting because Paul wanted Sinestro to be on Earth and interacting with Hal, and I was like, yeah, but that's not a story. Like, I need, like, why is he there? And of course, when you start asking why is where you're going to start getting some cool answers. And I think I hit upon something I think is really cool, but I'm very intimidated by Sinestro, because it's one of the reasons I never use Reverse Flash. It's like, what can I possibly say about this character that hasn't already been said? And that comes with a lot of expectation. And you're dealing with, I'm friends with Jeff Johns, which, me saying it out loud is completely bananas to me. But like, this guy that I read and idolized in terms of his writing, it's like, oh, now we kind of talk, and I'm like, so what am I going to add to this universe that this guy's already done it, So I think I come upon something really neat, and the way it's going to work is issue 1, obviously we have the little tease. Issue 2, it's going to be more Hal focused, and then 3 not 3 and 4. Then it goes into Night Terrors for 2 issues, and then back to number 3. And when we get back to number 3, the Sinestro story hits the ground running in a way, because I'm not one of those people that want to belabor a mystery too long, because if they're monthly, who wants to wait a year to find out of something? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, just in terms of, as a fan, I'm just like, let's get going. Come on. So I don't think people will, I'm going to try to keep it as much of a slow burn as I can, but I'm also not going to be like keeping everybody in suspense for 3 years,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that about your writing, Jeremy, because everybody has their own writing process, and so this is not to take away from everything, but there are a lot of books I think that decompress storytelling, and I appreciate like every time I read one of your books, you're not holding out on the audience. You never hold out on the audience. You like say I guess everything you can in an issue, and then the next issue is still full of stuff. So I appreciate that because that's the type of writing I like. Again, that doesn't take away from other people who maybe extend their stories out and they want to belabor the mystery or draw it out. But I like the fact that you give us everything. It's like I feel like a full meal when I read one of your issues.
Well, thank you. I mean, even with the Flash, what I generally try to do is have like a bit of an arc and then have some jumping on points for people that could be like and it worked. I mean, to a degree, and that's kind of the X-Files Buffy model, right? Like it's like jumping on points for people that aren't new or that are new, and then hit something that's the overarching plot. And I have a lot of cool, or at least I think cool stories I want to tell in the Green Lantern universe, and I'm terrified that sales will crater to the degree that it'll be like, well, that was a good 6 issues. Bye,
Joe, do you have thoughts on the Green Lantern book? Well, you haven't had a chance for you to weigh in.
I have a few, yes. Like Keith, I thought it was a great first issue, Jeremy. Probably your best since Flash 768.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'm an old school guy. I've been reading comic books since 1966. So Hal was my Green Lantern when I was introduced to the Green Lantern. But over the years, I too became a big John Stewart fan.
Yeah.
But I love Hal. I love what you're doing with him. And, down to his last $50, sitting on the top of his brother's trailer, drinking a soda. Back in the day, he would have been drinking a beer, though, I think.
Well, listen, I think it was originally a beer, but I got a note that said, nope.
Okay. So, but it reminded me of Hal back in the late 60s, at the end of the Silver Age, who couldn't keep a job. He was a toy salesman. He was an insurance salesman. So I love that little touch. And then when Carol is explained to him how he's an anachronism, because even the military's going to use drones to fight wars now. When he's a fighter pilot, I immediately thought of Star Trek, Jeremy, and I thought of the episode The Ultimate Computer and Captain Dunsel. When Captain Kirk was referred to as Cap. So I don't know if that was you threw it in there on purpose or not, but it resonated with me. So it was just a fun issue to read, a great setup, a great jumping on point, and I think the park.
Thank you. I think Hal is, he's one part Kirk, he's one part Maverick. Weirdly, I was watching Bull Durham, and I was like, oh, he's kind of Kevin Costner from Bull Durham. He's kind of like confident. Just, I don't know. It's just so different because it's like I don't know. He's not Wally. He's not goofy and running around. He's kind of sure of himself and confident, but. But he also, his life's a wreck. I mean, and this is the thing, it's a wreck in the right ways. He's a military, it's almost like he's a soldier that's coming back. And it's like, how do you come back and adjust when you've seen the things you've seen and done the things you've done? And how did you give that up? Like, why would you give that up to come back to Earth and, live, like you said, sit on a trailer and look at the stars and think about what you could be doing out there? That's a huge sacrifice. And, that opens up to a different mystery. And I'm excited to explore it. I'm excited, sort of like when I took over The Flash, my first arc was really about exploring who Hal is as a character, getting to know him and getting to know how to write him. And hopefully people stick around because I think there's going to be a lot of fun callbacks to, Silver Age stuff. And I want to have guest stars. Like, if I could have Guy in tomorrow, I would, because I love partner. But I want to take it slow. I want to do one thing that I think worked really well with The Flash was concentrating on a character and then bringing pieces of that character's world to the forefront to where, at least with The Flash, it was Wally, Linda, the kids, and then suddenly, Ace. And then it was like more Flash family. And then it became a bigger book. And at that point, you're reading it and you're like, oh, look at all these interesting characters. And it's not, oh, they all have speed powers. It's like, yeah, but that's not what it's about. It's all about how different they are in terms of people. And with Hal, I really want to concentrate on Hal and Carol, and then hopefully fold in some other people and things. And I have some, grand designs. We'll see what that means, further on.
No, that's fantastic. I like building small and having that
Yeah.
the hero rediscover himself in an environment he's that's changed on him. It's really great. I wanted to say one more, because we want to talk to you about some Flash stuff too. But I have to shout out your artist also. The art is amazing in that book
Zermanico's
too.
ridiculous. When we did Flashpoint Beyond, I didn't know who Zermanico was, and that's just because I'm an idiot. But it was like we would get this art back from him on Flashpoint Beyond, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. And as a writer, the fact is, this is a visual medium, and a good art covers a multitude of sins. And also, one of my goals is I want to write something that he's excited to draw, if that makes sense. Like, I can't imagine, I always feel bad if it's like, oh, I did 2 pages of people talking, I'm like, oh, I feel that poor guy, I want to get something cool that he could draw. And luckily we have some really cool stuff. He literally is like my Green Lantern ring in a way. It's like I'm writing this stuff and he builds the constructs,
Yeah, I love his Hal looks great. The whole book looks great, but his depiction of Hal and the suit and everything looks fantastic. So, so let's transition to Flash because we can get a little bit more into it because you've written a lot more of it. So,
yes.
And audience will be a little more spoilery if you haven't picked up the Flash book. I don't know what you're waiting for, but to go with something I wanted to start with your beginning run, just to ask for like ideas of where you got for the initial arc. It's very quantum leapy. Was that in your mind when you were writing that?
I mean, literally the first issue, he says, "Oh boy," when it was like, I mean, it's definitely an homage to that. I think I had that idea. If you're a fan of comics, you just come up with, you have ideas. All of us do, right? They just foolhardily let me in the door. So when they said, like, you got any ideas for the Flash? I'm like, yeah, I do. Because it originally started out as kind of a Superman idea I wanted. But this fits so much better because I was now playing with the Speed Force and the idea that these are, even from the beginning, talking about them as Speed Force conduits, and the fact that, like a television transmission, now it makes sense to me that he can go into these bodies because he's trapped in the Speed Force. But what we're really finding out is about this surge that obviously I was moving towards trying to. I absolutely wanted to retcon Heroes in Crisis fully at the beginning, and it's weird because. There's this. It is like, no offense to Tom King, because I think the book is really profound. I think Tom writes literature, honestly, and I write pulp in a way, not like good pulp, like like just kind of silly fun, whatever. Edgar Rice Burroughs, that's kind of the hero stuff I'm into, and I really wanted to retcon it all because I felt like that was still the elephant in the room, and they told me no, and I said, I'm going to do it anyways.
Good for you, Jeremy.
They said you could explain what the explosion is. I was like, great. Okay, that's good. But I was like, I really want to save all these characters. And they were like, no. And you can see in the book, because obviously in 1 Minute War, I call back to it. It's like, especially when Wally talks to Gold Beetle, that I was literally like, I wanted to do that a year and a half ago, and they were like, no, you can't do it. No, I can't do it. And then that editor left. And then I was like, so I knew I was going to move toward it, and I knew I was going to do it in 1 Minute War. And, I think, in retrospect, if I looked at 1 Minute War, I wish I had another full issue before the end. I think that would have been, so I could have some breathing room. I had this whole funny gag with, Booster Gold and Blue Beetle running out of the cloning factory from Heroes in Crisis with the clone of Wally, and then her just walking right in to get like an entire gold bug full of those characters and just like throw them out the bug onto the ground, because I wanted to save them all. And I wanted Wally to save them all. And weirdly, by doing that, I've codified Heroes in Crisis as having happened. And I actually weirdly think that was important for the character, because now Wally is a person that has experienced the ultimate trauma of killing someone, of losing his kids and all that stuff. And he's come out the other side being with a message of hope, and that it's never over until it's over. And you can hold out because, don't leave until the miracle happens. And I just thought that was like a real important thing. And that really redefines Wally in a lot of ways. Instead of like, yeah, he didn't do it, but he still went through that trauma. He still remembers it. And then he understands, oh, this is great. If I would have ended myself back then, I wouldn't have known what I didn't know, you know? And anyways, I could go on that forever.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, that the end of the first story arc where we talk about what is in the Speed Force and what the explosion was, I think was some of the most powerful stuff in the Flash run. So
thank you. Yeah, that they would. Yeah, the only thing they gave me is like, you can have a conversation with Roy, and I was like, or with the character or something. I said, can I have a conversation with Roy? Can they have a conversation? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, and I just tried to make that the best thing I could, because and what got me even writing it was when Roy looks into Wally's eyes and he's talking to Ollie. And I was like, that to me was everything. Because I love that moment between those two characters too, you know?
yeah, it was beautiful. It's just as well written as anything Tom King has written. So I'm going to tell you that.
Well,
That's
you
right.
can say that, but listen, I am the man that is the imposter syndrome. So I just sit there and I marvel at all these guys, and you try to live up. I don't know. I mean, you want it to be good. And you hope it's going to be good. And in some level, you're like, I don't care if you don't think it's good. You know what I mean? That was Batman Soul of the Dragon. I had so much fun making that movie with Bruce Timm and my buddy Jim. Like, I had so much fun just coming up with stuff and writing it and coming together with everything, that when it came out, I was like, oh yeah, no, there's going to be a lot of people that hate this because Batman, quote unquote, isn't in this movie that much, but I was like, I don't care. This is exactly the John Carpenter movie with Batman that I want to see. And at the end of the day, I have a Johnny Cage movie coming out, and the same thing. I'm like, listen, I get it. People are going to be like, I don't get it. And I'll be like, I totally understand, but I love it, and I would get that from people at DC. They would be like, I don't get this. The annual number 2, they were like, honestly, I don't get it, Jeremy. I'm like, I understand. You don't get it, And I'm like, but I do, and you let me do it. So suck it up,
Well, you've had such a great run with the fans on The Flash. You clearly had your finger on the pulse of the right decision. I mean, so much so that Keith is with us. Keith, that book turned you around, right? That first arc or the first issue, right?
Well, the whole thing is, Jeremy, I'm a huge Wally West fan. He's my favorite character in and out of comics. I've read every issue of his. I've read every Flash issue that you can get in print. With the exception of some of the Golden Age stuff. I love Wally. And so, needless to say, from 2009 to 2021 was not a good time for Wally West.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I can't thank you enough. Like, not only did you bring the character back, but you brought him back in a clever way, a smart way, a fun way, and with this like a ton of heart.
Thank you.
And love. It just felt like, I know you say, like, I've watched and I've read interviews and listened to interviews where you say, it takes a few issues or a little time for you to get in the head of the character. I felt like you had it with him like immediately. And you kind of just ingrained that saying, don't leave before the miracle. That's going to be something that I just think about with Wally West forever. That's as prominent in my mind as, my name is Wally West. I'm the Flash, the fastest man alive. That's just there for me. And
thank you.
The annual was, God, that was the annual with him and Linda. That was, I was gushing about that. I mean, that's Joe. I gush him about almost every issue, but for me, it's blink of the eye.
Yeah.
The annual 2 and really like tied with all of them is the father-daughter dance issue, man. That's just that's like a special issue.
Yeah, I'm sure I let you, like, what happened with that. Maybe I didn't tell you the story. Maybe you've heard it, but I was in the car and I was talking to my editor and I hung up the phone, and my oldest daughter was just like, Dad, what you should do with the Flash? And she went on for like a half an hour. And I was like, honey, you should just write your own book. And then I stopped and I went, well, maybe you will write it with me. And I called my editor back and I was like, hey, can my daughter write an issue with me? And they're like, sure. I'm like, awesome. So I got out the whiteboard, bought some snacks, showed her what a 3-act structure is. And she came up with Dr. Nightmare. And we had just come back from a daddy-daughter dance not too long ago. And she drew all the dreams and the nightmares. And we sent them to Christian Duce, and he did his versions of her art. And sadly, legally, I guess, when the solicits came out, I was like, my daughter's name's not on this. And they were like, oh yeah, we can't do it. And I've rarely been so mad. But, you know, I went to my daughter, I go, listen, and they said, we can, you know, if you want, we can shelve this issue. And then it'll never come out. And I went to my daughter, I said, listen, these are the options. I go, one, they're either going to shelve the issue and it's never going to come out because your name won't be on it because they can't do it. Or we let it come out and I will immediately tell everybody that you helped me with it. And she says, if it comes out, do I still get paid? And I was like, okay, 9-year-old. She was 8 at the time. I'm like, okay, 8-year-old. She just wants the payday. I go, yeah, you'll get paid. She's like, let's get it out there then. And I was like, okay.
Smart kid.
That's such a heartwarming issue, though. It really is.
Yeah,
it's like,
it was everything. It was everything.
That Christian Duce?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to say his last name.
His art's amazing. I reread it before. It's fantastic. I want to see more of his work.
I'm actually sad I didn't get to do more with him, but that was the definitive issue for me that I fell in love with Ivory. Like that was okay, I get this kid. I love this kid. And then when I did the issue in the Gem world, when Jay had an action log, I was like, okay, now I love this kid. I know who this kid is. And then Maxine Baker, I was like, I love Maxine Baker, you know. And I kept thinking they've just aged up so many kids in the DC universe. I was like, well, I got to make my own kid super team, and it was always going to be, you know, there's a character that, you know, a couple other characters that haven't arrived yet, and then getting to do one with the Super Sons was, you know, that was part of it too. I wanted to make, okay, what's this new, you know, Young Justice Super Kids team or whatever. But I love the kids to the point that I became, and I am so invested in the Flash when they said, hey, listen, they want to go in a new tonal direction. And I was crushed. Literally like the first things out of my mouth were, please tell me you're not going to hurt the kids. like they're real, you know? And I was finding myself just completely hurting, or like I was like a divorce or something, you know? And I was really sad about it. And, you know, it was only until I got to announce it to everybody that my focus really started to shift toward Green Lantern. And, so that was, you know, I love those characters and that family. I really do. You can see me pushing into this kind of Fantastic Four Incredible space with that character. And I thought this would be really cool. This would be a really cool thing for these guys to go on adventures together and do stuff. So.
Wow.
Fantastic. Jeremy, an observation and a question. An observation is your run on Wally is as entertaining and as historically important as Wade and John's. I really mean that. It was just fantastic.
Very kind and very high praise.
Well, you deserve it. And Jeremy, how the hell did you get them to let you do Belief issue 776? Because that was amazing.
Oh, you know, this is the
interactive issue where you got to blow on the cameras and turn the book around.
so I've been thinking about that. I always thought in my back of my head before I was doing comics, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I was reading a Doctor Strange book and he turned to the audience and said blah blah blah, and so it was kind of in the back of my head, and then I was like, please, you know, hey, I want to do this interactive, and I have to say, like Mike Cotton, who is my original editor, he did let me take a lot of weird chances, and this is the thing. That first run is bananas. The things I got to do. Kevin McGuire drew 10 like that's everything to me. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I did this Super Friends thing where he jumps into the Reverse Flash, and it's so silly and ridiculous, and they let me do it, and it doesn't matter if I get fired tomorrow because that happened. You know, like. But the one with Belief, I was so excited about it. And I printed off the pages, and I was like, it has to be printed this way for it to work, you know, and I'd send them video, and it was like, it came back wrong. I'm like, no, you can't do that, you know, and I was really, really nervous about it because they didn't do it. I was like, hey, in digital, you got to tell people to lock their screen, and, oh, we can't do it. I'm like, okay, I don't know why. And I'm fairly new still at this point. And the only thing drives me nuts is in the floppy copy, you know, they would turn the page and it would be like a house ad. I'd be like, you're killing Like you're
Yeah,
killing
me,
me,
right?
you know? But it was so fun to do. And what was even more fun, it was not just that, it was like, okay, now you have to go back at the end and find the glyphs. And that became this whole thing where people were like, I can't even find them. And Fernando, who did the artwork, unbelievable. When he sent me the artwork, I was like, I can't find them all, you know? And they were there, but I was just like, this is killing me. And people were telling me, like, I looked through this book for half an hour. And then they finally see it. They're like, oh my gosh. But that was just a certain amount of like, you know, you read a book and it's over and done with. But this was a book that had this kind of weird, you know, shelf life that people could look at over and over again. And it was such a fun. This one guy sent me a picture of his computer screen broken because he tried to flip his computer screen.
Oh no!
Flipped. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, you know. But it's so much fun, and that was another mark of obviously my running away. You know, originally when I started, they said that DC continuity was kind of like everything that's happened has happened. So I really wanted to write Wally as if everything kind of happened, you know, and the continuity was really up in the air a little bit. And so I started using a lot of characters and a lot of villains and stuff that I don't know if it's just because it feels like sometimes other books are siloed. Like there's not as much use of other characters. There's not much, oh yeah, this character's in this book today. And this, you know, this is really fun for me to be going, okay, I'm going to have Mr. Terrific doing this, and then Superman's going to show up here, and you know, Calypso is going to be doing this, and I had so much fun just kind of adding and playing with, and then being able to make my own characters is a whole other level of you know, wishes come true. Even though I haven't been aggressive at it, but I've always tried to make a character that's really fun, whether it's Omega Bam Man or Gold Beetle or whatever. It's like I want it to be something that's kind of like, oh, this character is kind of interesting. I want to see more, you know.
You brought back Starbreaker, right, Jeremy?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like I'm like poring over who's who and like who can I use, who can I not use? You know, looking up things and oh, that character's really cool. That'll be a really cool character to play with. And you have to use somebody that you're hoping no one else uses, and it's somebody maybe that old timers like me would go, oh, I know that character. You know,
this old time we knew it.
That was awesome, and he was a cool design. And when Fernando drew him, I was like, "Oh man, he's spooky. He does look like Space Dracula or something."
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, your writing. I never really cared for the character Mr. Terrific. I love him in your book. I really enjoy Mr. Terrific now.
Yeah, I wanted him to be Buckaroo Banzai. That was my only thing. I was like, okay, he's going to be Buckaroo Banzai. I'm going to push him into that direction because I don't get the Vulcan version of Mr. Terrific. You know, the like unemotional Mr. Terrific.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of how he's always done. And when he first shows up at the like Jiffy Lube that he owns, you know, and I'm like, of course he owns it. Of course I have a running list of all the companies he owns because they all funnel into his enterprises. And I just thought, yeah, this is cool. Like if I can make him more Buckaroo Banzai, like he just does all sorts of things, that'll be really fun for me as a character.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I have to shout out because he's also one of my all-time favorite characters who doesn't get used as much. The interaction with the Spectre and Wally was one of my favorite things you did. The dialogue was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was amazing.
I got a little bit of flack on that. Like, you know, I'm a pretty religious guy, but like I thought in that moment, I'm like, listen, I didn't create the Spectre. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there you go.
Like that's literally his job, you know? And so I love the idea that, you know, Wally has seen, I've said this before, but I think speedsters in general are outside of time and space inside the DC universe. And I think Wally in particular knows and is very aware of continuity changes. And I also like to think because of all that and all the trauma he's been through, there's a certain amount of hope and joy and whatever. And I feel like I love the idea that when Eclipso, who is the former spirit of vengeance for God, is doing all this stuff, and if he is that, and it's sort of like how do I describe it? There was this great when Peter David was running and doing the Hulk, which I loved. There's Rick Jones gets married, And there's a great moment where Mephisto shows up. Like everybody's at this wedding, right? Like Skrulls and Kree and everything. And Mephisto shows up, and the Hulk realizes, well, if the devil's here, then so is God. So in the same way, I was like, well, if Eclipso's here, then the thing that's protecting Wally, and I remember people like, why is Wally unaffected? You know, it was like, well, because he's kind of got this little shine on him, you know, and it was just fun. And then to have him, of course, going like, wait, what? You know, like, he likes me, and then it's like, oh man, okay, I wait till I tell Batman types. It's funny. I don't know.
It was funny, and it was touching, and it was a real character moment for both characters.
Both
characters.
Yeah.
So,
well,
and I'm a big fan of.
Might show up in Green Lantern because that was Hal's former job. You know, so.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
I look forward to that. I'm always good for Spectre. I know he doesn't show up that often, but when he does, I'm always happy when a writer uses him well. So thank you for doing that for the character, for both characters. One of our other co-hosts who sadly could not be here but really wanted to be, he had a question for you of a writing question, but sort of a general writing question for you that I want to ask. He was saying, when writing characters who have so many incredible strong applications for their powers, like the Flash, how do you balance showing off that range of abilities without those abilities taking over the story?
With the Flash, it was really hard because I wasn't like I wasn't like hardcore Flash guy when I took over, and it was I just read a bunch of stuff, right, and so as I got deeper and deeper into it, I was always like, I was scared because I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy moves super fast. So technically no one could stop. No one could defeat him. And then that made me kind of move sideways into the Doctor Who element of it, of like, okay, so if that's the case, then you have to put them on unsure footing. You have to make it so that, like, have I seen Flash fight people with magic powers? Well, I don't recall. That's going to be interesting because how does magic's a different set of rules, right, than physics in a lot of ways. And it became a challenge, but I don't look at it as a challenge. It became more exciting of like, ooh, how can I put him in a situation? Okay, now he's jumping through time. Okay, now he's, but I also think with Wally in particular, he's not like Barry. He doesn't just speed punch you before asking questions. There's a little bit of him, and because of his trauma and because of what he's gone through, there's a lot of empathy there. So I think he's not going to go full bore and take you out. He's going to see, is this a person that I can talk to? Like, is it like the Rogues? Is there a human side to them that I can appeal to? And because I think he understands what it means to be broken in a lot of ways. So it does push you in a more character way. And as far as his powers, I mean, if you look at my run, he doesn't use them as much as probably other runs. There's a lot more to it. And all I can think of is when I did the issue where the Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he gets Kid Flash out of Titans Academy. And I just kept thinking, like, there's no way this guy that can move at the speed of whatever is just going to patrol Keystone City or Central City. And then that was like the boots on the ground speech where it was like, no, I don't have X-ray vision. I'm not up there in the sky. I don't have a bat signal. I'm on the ground, and I have this route now that I take because I patrol the world. Is like, oh, I don't know if I've heard that, and I really like that. I really like that he's there eye to eye. He sees the need on the ground, and I just, I don't know, the power. It ended up being like all that stuff became character stuff that I really enjoyed, which is funny because I don't think of story character first at all. I think of plot first, and then when I get into plot, I start thinking of character. Whereas like Jeff and my friend Tim, they think character first, and then they find the plot, which is a totally different way of writing.
Yeah, that's yeah. I always you're one of the first writers I've heard like that's more plot driven. I always like hear writers say, "Oh, I'm character driven, and what the characters tell me is where I go." So that's very interesting.
Yeah, I want a big. I try to get a big hook. I want a big idea. It's like how do I put it? Like Terminator. It's like, oh yeah, this robot comes back from the future to kill the woman that will give birth to the guy that's going to save the future. It's like that's a big plot hook. And then it becomes this love story, and it becomes about, humanity and stuff. That's definitely how I go. Because the honest truth is, I don't know if it worked. Every time I put out an issue, I'm like, oh man, this is it. This is where they figure out I suck, and it's, every time I'm absolutely terrified. When Green Lantern came out, it's just like, oh my gosh. I don't know if in my head it works, but I don't know if anybody else will like it. And yeah, so that's a writer thing too. That's a human thing. The imposter syndrome of it all.
Oh, well, you're like I said, you've earned a lot of goodwill with the fans, especially these fans. So whatever you put out, we'd be very into.
Thank you.
Keith and Joe, you have other Flash things before? I just wanted, I didn't want to like move off of the Flash. If there's some more Flash stuff you wanted.
Yeah, I had. I could talk about the Flash forever, but I have one more question. I'd love to know the answer to. About a few issues after the opening arc, a blink of an eye, Wally's costume was changed into the 2009 Rebirth costume, which was like a mix between his JLU costume and his 90s classic costume. I was always curious, was that an idea of yours or editorial or come down from upper?
Yeah, no, that is, listen, man, I can barely dress myself. And so like, this is one of those things where I always am like deferring. I actually really like Wally's costume with his hair coming out of the top, but I don't care enough to fight over it. I'm just like, oh, my boss likes this. And I'm like, great. Okay. And that's really the extent I thought about it. And I always try to get the artist's input on all that stuff, because honestly, I don't care enough about that in particular, just because I suck at that stuff. I'm really, really terrible. The artists will send me back stuff, especially Zermanical. Like, here are 12 different variations. I'm like, oh no, like I don't even see the difference. It's just all awesome. And I'm like, how do I decide? I don't know. It all looks good. And as I'm wearing like the most mismatched shirt, I look like, Ragman over here, and they're asking for, what do you think about this color? I'm like, I don't know, it's a color, so no, that wasn't my decision. Yeah.
Well, either way, I thought it was a great idea. I think it distinguishes him enough from Barry Allen. Let's see if you get the coloring right, a little darker tone. Right.
Well, I always felt like I also feel like a lot of the way that I was writing Wally was much more like the Justice League Unlimited version, of Wally too, the cartoon version that Michael Rosenbaum did, brilliantly voiced. Mm-hmm. There was some of that too, and I mean, listen, it is a weird thing that they took a character that has been the Flash for years, and then they beat the crap out of him, and then it was like, oh yeah, we're gonna make him disappear. I was like, well, I don't understand. I was like, I don't understand. So that was always my through line. I was like, listen, as long as I'm writing him, he's going to be okay. Because it was weird. It was because the fan base was like talking to a skittish puppy, they're like, no, we don't believe you. They were just flinching every time you would like say something. And they're like, oh, here it comes. He's going to kill him. And now it's flipped to where I see people, every time somebody posts something about Spider-Man, there's like a Flash fan right under it going like, guys, the Flash is having a great time with the family, It's just like, oh man, that's brutal.
But it's true. Spider-Man could use some of the love that you're giving Wally. Yes, so yes. You could use some of that love. So.
Poor Peter Parker needs Xanax or something else he needs right now. He's in trouble. Jeremy, issue 798, the most recent issue, where Granny Goodness snatches Wade, the baby. There's a couple of references there. Like before you said that you believe that Hal's part Jim Kirk, and I totally buy into that. And Keith made this observation to me offline the other day, how you had that "Make It So" reference. In 798, and I also picked up a reference. I don't know if this is how many of our listeners are going to realize this, but when the Fair Play spaceship takes off to go rescue with the Terrifics and to rescue the baby, somebody says space rescue ship is a go, and I really thought of Thunderbirds.
Oh yeah, well, I have a credit on Thunderbirds or Go.
I watched that episode this morning, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, all of that is in the mix. Definitely, Star Trek's in the mix. Yeah. But I've been planting the quote unquote captain aspect of that from the very beginning. when Gold Beetle would call him captain and hint that they would go on all these adventures. And that was always something, that was what I wanted to do post 800 before they told me I was going to be moving on. I had a kind of grander plan for that. And I was like, giant spaceship, Wally's in the chair, there's all of that stuff. Thunderbirds are go, a lot of Star Trek. So, and you'll see a lot of Star Trek in the next issue, which is really $7.99 that comes out on Tuesday is really my last issue. The story that I have in 800 is definitely a one-off, just kind of fun piece of the plot. It doesn't pick up on any threads. It's just kind of a fun addition. But $7.99 is really kind of my last issue of the book.
Do you think the stuff that you had outlined after 800 is, if you get the opportunity to do Flash again, that'll be something you'll be able to pick up, or it's hard to say? Or
I mean, you'll see when you read $7.99. I leave a very open door for,
cool,
for what I would love to do.
Yeah, very, very cool. I look forward to that.
So in 20 years after Cy Spurrier does an incredible 2-decade run, I look forward to getting a shot to
I gotta tell you, Jeremy, my initial thought when I heard the news, well, first when I heard the news, I thought Wally was going to be done and they were going to replace him with Barry due to the movie coming back. But I had this hope, and I still have it. About 10, 15 years ago, Mark Waid and Mike Wieringo were booted off of Fantastic Four in the middle of an amazing run because they were going to relaunch Steve McNiven and someone else. And the fan outlash was so much that literally they gave the other guys a new 4 book, and they continued with Waid and Wieringo. And I'm still holding out hope.
As am I, Jeremy.
That would be a dream come true. But I also don't want to be disparaging of the people that are. Cy seems like a really nice guy, and I love, like I said, I love Wally. I literally thought I wasn't going to be able to do any more speed, and then Jeff came to me about the Jay Garrick book, the 6-issue Jay Garrick, part of the New Golden Age that we're doing, and I was excited about that because at least I get to play with Poppy for a little bit, So.
No, that's right, Poppy.
It's incredible.
Well, I want to. I know we only have a little bit more time with you, and I want to talk about something you brought up before, because, like you said, Batman: Soul of the Dragon. It was not like I'm a big Batman fan, but it didn't stick with me right away. But when I finally got to it, it's a fantastic movie. It's
Thank you. The soundtrack is amazing.
It's so. I'm a martial artist. I'm a martial arts movie fan. Yep. Enter the Dragon is my favorite martial arts movie, and it feels like you wrote a spiritual sequel to Enter the Dragon with a little bit of Big Trouble in Little China in there. So
you totally nailed it. That's exactly how I approached it. I was like, I want to do Enter the Dragon meets Big Trouble in Little China because, first of all, Big Trouble in Little China is one of my favorite movies, probably in my top 2. I'm a huge martial art guy. I have a black belt in Hapkido from like the Bong Suhan school of martial arts. But I've done martial arts. I was mercilessly beat up in junior high, and it was kind of, I always say, Jesus saved my soul, but martial arts saved my life. And I'm not even kidding you. Wow. It was. I've been doing martial arts for ages, and I'm a huge martial art fan to the point we're having a Writers Guild strike out here. And I was on the picket line the other day, and I saw Thomas Ian Griffith, who I know from like Excessive Force and Hollow Point and all these cool low budget martial art movies when I was growing up, and he's also in Karate Kid 3, and I was like, hey, can you still do an axe kick? Like I was just such a little goofball. He was super nice. But when it came to this movie, what was interesting was I had been pitching, I wanted to do an Enter the Dragon. I go, I really want to do an Enter the Dragon Batman Enter the Dragon. I think one of the things that DC, they don't really do much with, maybe they do in the Bat universe, but like I'm a huge nut for DC Comics martial arts. They're so codified, they're so cool. And when Chuck Dixon was doing Birds of Prey, and then Gail Stone took over, and you just have Shiva, Cassandra, and Black Canary, all that stuff, O Sensei. And so Bruce Timm came into a meeting, and he's like, I kind of want to do some 70s martial art Batman thing. And everybody was like, oh, you got to talk to Jeremy, And I never really worked with Bruce. And I was assured that I would get fired within the first day. And then we met, and it was like within 20 minutes, I'm having him pull up a scene from Lone Wolf McQuade. and because he didn't believe me that Chuck Norris is buried alive in it and opens a beer and like, you know, and our story meetings were like an hour, maybe an hour about the movie, and then it was everything else was about, oh, have you read the Destroyer book series? I'm like, no, and I'm like reading them all and talking martial arts and all this stuff. So it was such a glorious, wonderful time to write it. And then Bruce was so specific about certain things. And then as a complete martial art nut, it was like, oh my gosh, who should we get to be the voices? And I'm like, here's my list of actual martial artists, you know? And originally I tried to get them to cast Scott Adkins as Bruce Wayne. And they were like, no, Jeremy. And I wanted Richard Norton as one of the characters in the background. And they're like, who's Richard Norton? I'm like, you guys are morons, you know? And we got Michael Jai White and Mark Dacascos and Kelly Hu. And when Mark Dacascos, I have the great picture with nunchucks and Mark Dacascos. And I'm like trying to be cool and absolutely failing. And I'm like, I'm a big fan. And he's like, oh, thanks. I'm like, I don't think you understand. I'm like, only the strong crying Freeman, like, you know, brother of the wolf. I'm a nut. And he's like, oh, you're a real fan. I'm like, yes, I'm a real fan. A nut for that stuff. So it is what it is. The movie is what it is, but I love it. So I love it. I love Shiva. I love Chuck Dixon did with Scott McDaniel did this awesome Richard Dragon series, and I remember reading that and being like, "Oh my gosh, Richard Dragon is suddenly my favorite character." And a lot of those martial arts stuff, man, I'm a nut for all the martial art DC stuff.
Yeah,
Jeremy, real quick, nerd question here: Lady Shiva versus Cassandra Cain.
I actually think Cassandra, and I'll tell you why. The Batgirl, that first Batgirl series is so good, and her being raised to, you know, interpret people, like read people by their body movements and stuff. And I really like Cassandra Cain a lot, and I wish they had never taken away that awesome scarecrowish, you know, Batman outfit, and they would have kept pushing into that, because they started doing some stuff like I stopped after like she was part of the League of Assassins and killed people or whatever. I'm like, I'm out, you know. But I also love that in the Birds of Prey that Shiva came on and she became kind of like, her and Black Canary had this kind of like interesting relationship too. But yeah, Cassandra Cain for me. I know, maybe that's crazy, but.
No, I don't think so.
No, that's the Batgirl I started really reading. I found about Barbara when I got to Barbara, she was already Oracle in the wheelchair, so that was the Batgirl that I started reading.
And I loved Oracle as a character. I thought that was. I was like, why do you need to change this? This is awesome, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you. So, well, I know we have to let you go in a minute. I just want to do a quick like lightning round thing. Maybe we'll have you on again in the future to talk about more, but. Because you've mentioned this in other interviews, who's your favorite Doctor Who? Who's your favorite?
Oh gosh, come on, man. Okay, so I mean, my first Doctor Who was oh my gosh, my brain just shut down. My first Doctor Who was oh my gosh, why can't I think for the life of me? Jelly Babies, Long Scarf.
Tom Baker. Tom Baker, fourth Doctor.
Tom Baker was my first one that I really, really loved. Now, that being said. And then when Chris Eccleston showed up, I was like, I really like Chris Eccleston. I really like David Tennant. I really do. But the pilot episode of Matt Smith is so good. The Vincent Van Gogh episode is so good. I don't know. I'm going to say David Tennant. I'll say David Tennant.
That's a good one. But I, as a person who loves Doctor Who, but also a person who writes amateurishly, I think that 11th hour episode of Doctor Who is like the best pilot / continuity episode I've ever seen.
It's so good. But then like David Tennant, it's like I would show Blink to people as like a gateway drug to get into Who, because it's so like, what is happening here with the Weeping Angels? But I grew up watching like PBS with Tom Baker on it. And, you know, with the Canine and the Master and all that, I was like, this is a weirdo show. And you'd watch it and you'd be like, I don't know. I feel like I ate something bad a little bit because it's creepy. The monsters were creepy. And I was like, oh, and it was foreign. It was shot in that strange, like, video format. And my friends are real huge Whovians. So they have way different characters. I forget who does the Venusian martial arts. That's one of my friend's favorite. And, I have this great Doctor Who story, but this is lightning round, so I can't tell it to you now. So anyway,
yes. Joe, Keith, you have any lightning round questions before we wrap things up?
I have one. Jeremy, Christopher Reeve, or Henry Cavill?
Oh, I'm a Christopher Reeve guy.
I knew it.
I honestly think that still is the it is a perfect superhero movie. That first one.
Yes.
I mean, it's literally like by the time you see Superman, it's like 45 minutes in or something crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And that heartbreaking death of the dad, and it's just like there's some things you can save, and there's some things you can't. But everything in that movie, just his characterization of rolling the shoulders back, and he grows a couple inches, but yeah. As a kid, when I'm watching him, when he finally comes to Metropolis and after he saves Lois, and it's like that little montage of him like taking out the robbers that go on the boat, and then the cat. I remember the first time I saw the cat burglar, and he like looks up like, what? And I was like, it's so cool. And it's like, say, man, that's a nice outfit. Like all of that stuff. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, all of that stuff, so phenomenal. And this is the thing. I really didn't like Man of Steel when it came out. And then I've since gone back and kind of watched it with different eyes because I am a nerd that is very reactionary. So, like when I saw Phantom Menace, I'm like, how dare you, But now I watch it with my kids and they're like, man, Jar Jar's so funny. I'm like, oh, I'm wrong. Like, this is not for me. And this is a movie for the age that I was when I saw it in some ways. And I'm not saying that there's not holes and problems, and even with Man of Steel, which the soundtrack Man of Steel is really wonderful, but I forgave a lot of problems that I think I was just clinging on to, because I do think the Richard Donner movie is so good that it's such a, I mean, at least he was like, I can't do that, so I'll do something else.
That's great. Hey, Keith, do you have a lightning round question?
I think I have a tough one. I think I do, at least based on what I know of you. Blue Beetle or Booster Gold?
Oh, Blue Beetle.
Wow, that was quick. Okay.
No.
Okay.
The Charlton, it was Modern Comics at the time, but I one of the first comics I bought for myself was Blue Beetle versus the Squids, with the Question as a backup before it was Charlton Comics, and it's Ditko, Steve Ditko, which I love because my dad had given me a paperback of Doctor Strange, Ditko, and I was like, I don't know who this crazy artist writer is, but he's awesome. And so when I read it, I was like, this is so cool and dynamic and fun. And it also had an element, I don't know if you remember this, in the Marvel Universe Handbook, Mark Grunwald, I guess, spearheaded that, and he would always do like schematics of things, right? Like schematics of Hawkeye's arrows or whatever. And even in this Blue Beetle, it'd be like, here's kind of the schematic of his bug and his gun, and the Ted Cord Blue Beetle. And then I was, we didn't have the internet, so I'm going to the library and finding out about Dan Garrett. And I was like, this is a really unusual hero, a guy that became a superhero because his friend died and said, here's my magic scarab, and it doesn't work for him. And he's still like, well, I guess I made a promise, and I love that run. I love Len Wein's run. Obviously, when he got on the Justice League International, that was a big deal. And I remember on the Countdown to Infinite Crisis, when they killed, I was so mad at Jeff. I told him this when I met him. It was both the best Ted Cord story I'd ever read, and I was so mad because they killed Ted Cord. Oh, I was so mad. But it was a really, really good story. So I'm a big Ted Cord guy. I like Booster, but he's if it's a Laurel and Hardy, it's like Booster is kind of the goof off more than Ted. He gets lumped in with them, especially in Justice League International when they start buying like islands and doing stuff. But I'm a big, and I'm such a big Ted Cord guy that when they brought Jaime Reyes, I was like, how dare you? And then you realize you're like, oh, I get it. Okay, I get it. So much so that you can go on YouTube, and I have this is years ago. This is like 15 years ago. I did like a video just about the 3 Blue Beetles. This was right after I was like, there are 3 blue. And it was this stupid when YouTube was fresh and new, and I was learning how to edit things, and it was just this diehard love letter to Blue Beetle. So there's your answer. These are not answers for a lightning round. I am terrible. I am a
No, those are
Good stuff, Jeremy.
that was fantastic. Well, we won't keep you any longer. The last thing I could say, just to say how much I appreciate your work, is that I have just been, for a lot of reasons, not been buying comics in the last few years just because of price and expense and time. But you got me to go out and buy books again.
Woo!
So
Awesome.
so thank you.
Well, thank you.
And listening audience, if you like, you can get Jeremy's work any comic book store, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, anywhere his work is, and I advise you to pick it up. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. I can't tell you what an honor and a privilege it was to speak to you today, and I'm sure Joe and Keith feel the same way.
Well, thank you.
Very much so.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy.
Great honor. Jeremy, when I read your stuff, I'm a 10-year-old kid again.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. No, listen,
Yes.
when I write my stuff, I'm a 10-year-old kid again. So.
I feel like sometimes I have to say it with the way, I mean, listen, this is not taking, again, from any artist or any type of media, but your stuff is fun. And sometimes you have to emphasize that there is fun in those comic books. As you know, as much like the dark and gritty stuff, there's always something fun.
No, right. I want to be able it to be something. I kind of want it to be a place in a store like that if a parent came to a comic book store and said, "Hey, what can I read for my kid, or what can my kid read?" It's like, you can read this. It's what X-Men. What I shoot for is like that X-Men growing up. It's like it was, there was stakes and exciting and whatever, but it wasn't so graphic in any particular way that I would get in trouble for reading it. And I really think that I don't mind all the dark gritty stuff, but I think there has to be other stuff too. And
Yes.
I really wanted to make it a book that anybody could come to and anybody could read.
Absolutely, yeah. If we still had the comic book store, we'd always be able to recommend your book to a young kid coming in. So that's something good. So listening audience, thank you for joining us for this amazing episode. Again, pick up any of Jeremy Adams' books if you haven't already. If you're listening to this podcast, I can't imagine you haven't, but please go out and do it. And if you have any thoughts about the things we've spoken about today, please put them in the comments section when we post this episode. We thank you for listening. And once again, thank you, Jeremy, for being here. And we will talk to you on the next episode.